My name is Taylor Monroe, and at 32 years old, I finally achieved my dream of buying my own house. After years of saving every penny, I kept it secret from my overly involved family. Then one day, I came home early to find my mother, Janet, giving an unauthorized tour to my sister-in-law Vanessa and her friend Olivia. I stood frozen in shock, anger rising, as I watched them invade my privacy. If you have ever had family members who crossed your boundaries, drop a comment below and let me know where you are watching from. Please hit subscribe if you want to hear. With a panned next. Growing up in the Collins household meant never having a moment after privacy. My mother Janet was the definition of a helicopter parent before that term even existed. From my earliest memories, personal space was a foreign concept. My childhood bedroom door had no lock because we are family and family has nothing to hide from each other. This family philosophy extended to every aspect of my life. I still remember the burning humiliation I felt at 13 when I discovered my mother reading my diary. The little pink book with the flimsy lock had been my refuge. The one place I thought my thoughts could be truly my own. When I confronted her, tears streaming down my face, she seemed genuinely puzzled by my distress. "I need to know what is going on in your life, Taylor Monroe," she said, her voice maddeningly calm. "How else can I protect you?" That moment crystallized. For me, in our house, love and control were considered the same thing. My mother opened my mail, listened to my phone calls, and questioned my friends with the tenacity of an FBI agent. My father, William, was more hands-off, but he never challenged her behavior. Creating a silent alliance I could not penetrate. Things shifted dramatically when my brother Ethan was born when I was 8. He quickly became the golden child, though subjected to the same suffocating oversight I endured. But unlike me, Ethan seemed to thrive under the attention, perhaps because as the only boy and the baby, the scrutiny came with extra privileges. "Your brother needs more support," became a common refrain whenever I pointed out the disparity in our treatment. I taught myself to need less, want less, and eventually to expect less. I learned to keep the important things hidden, not in diaries that could be found, but deep within myself. When I left for college, I thought freedom had finally arrived. I chose a state university 4 hours away, far enough to necessitate living in the dorms. Those first months were intoxicating. No one checked when I came home or questioned who I spent time with. I could eat ice cream for breakfast if I wanted to, but the freedom was short-lived. By midterms, my mother had somehow befriended my resident advisor, Laura, and regularly received updates about my comings and goings. She surprised me with visits at least twice a month, always bringing homemade food and cleaning supplies, and always finding a way to reorganize my side of the dorm room, while lamenting how my roommate Zoe must be a terrible influence because of the way she kept her things. After college, I took a job as a financial analyst in our hometown, partly because the opportunity was excellent, but mostly because the alternative, a position in Chicago, was met with such a campaign of worry, and that I found myself surrendering once again to the gravitational pull of family obligation. "Family stays together," my mother insisted. "You will thank me someday when you have your own children and need help." The pattern continued as I established my career. I rented an apartment just 15 minutes from my parents' home, close enough to make declining Sunday dinners nearly impossible, but far enough that daily drop-ins required at least some. When Ethan married Vanessa 5 years ago, I watched with a mixture of envy and concern as she was absorbed into our family dynamic. Vanessa was everything. I was not outgoing, willing to share every detail of her life, and seemingly comfortable with my mother's involvement. They spoke daily, shopped together, and Vanessa consulted my mother on everything from recipes to relationship advice. When Ethan and Vanessa bought their house, just 3 blocks from our parents', my mother was ecstatic. "Now, we just need to find you a place in the neighborhood," she would say, regularly sending me listings for homes on their street. Then we would all be together just as it should be. But I had been quietly saving for years, living well below my means and investing carefully. As a financial analyst, I understood the power of compound interest and disciplined saving. By 34, I had amassed a substantial down payment, enough to consider houses in neighborhoods far from my family orbit. I tried once, 3 years ago, to explain my desire for more independence. The family meeting I called to discuss my possible move to the east side of town about 30 minutes away became an intervention with a variant from my father to Ethan to my Aunt Patricia, listing reasons why separating from the family would be disastrous. "You have always been so sensitive," my mother said, tears in her eyes. If you move so far away, who will check on you if you do not answer your phone? Who will bring you soup when you are sick? Defeated, I retreated and renewed my apartment lease. But something had shifted inside me. I began to understand that my independence would never be given. It would have to be taken. And so with each passing month, my determination grew alongside my savings account. The decision to keep my house hunting secret was not made lightly. I had seen how my family behaved when Ethan and Vanessa bought their home. My mother inserted herself into every step of the process, attending all showings, offering gunslist opinions about everything from the neighborhood safety to the kitchen cabinet finishes, and even attempting to negotiate directly with the seller. Despite the presence of a realtor, I still remember Vanessa's face as she stood in what would become their living room, her excitement dimming as my mother declared the ceiling too low into the south-facing windows a problem for furniture placement. Though Vanessa loved the house, she began to echo my mother's concerns, her own preferencing under the weight of family input. I could not bear the thought of my dream being similarly dismantled. So when I finally felt financially ready to buy, I created an elaborate cover. I told my family I was taking a financial planning course on Tuesday and Thursday of innings, when I was actually meeting with realtors and viewing properties. I used my lunch breaks for phone calls with mortgage brokers and home inspectors. I became an expert at diverting conversions away from my future plans. My search began in January, the coldest month of the year, when the real estate market was at its slowest. I reasoned fewer options meant less chance of someone spotting me at an open house. I researched neighborhoods carefully, looking for areas with good appreciation, but far enough from my family's usual haunts to minimize accidental discoveries. The process was exhausting. Without family support, every decision rested solely on my shoulders. There were nights I lay awake, questioning if the secrecy was worth the stress, if I was reacting to what my mother would surely describe as her loving concern. But then I would remember the look on Vanessa's face in that living room, and my resolve would strengthen. After seeing 27 houses, I found it the one. A 1920s colonial with original hardwood floors, a bay window perfect for reading, and a small but charming gardening the back. It sat on a quiet street in Oakwood, a neighborhood 35 minutes from my parents' home, and known for its mature trees and community atmosphere. The moment I walked through the door, I felt something I had rarely experienced. Growing up peace. My realtor Sophia noticed my reaction immediately. Unlike other realtors I had worked with, she never pushed or rushed my decisions. A woman in her 50s, with an easy laugh and forthright manner, she had quickly come to understand my situation without my having to explain too much. "You love this one," she said. Not a question but a statement. "Is it that obvious? Taylor Monroe, I have been showing you houses for 3 months. This is the first time you have looked like you are already living in one." The closing process was nerve-wracking. I scheduled the signing for a Wednesday morning, telling my office I had a doctor's appointment and my family I had an important client meeting. I created a new email address just for house-related correspondence and had all documents mailed to a post office box I rented. I paid extra for a mobile notary to meet them at a coffee shop rather than going to the title company, where I might be seen. Through it all, guilt gnawed at me. Was I being ridiculous? Would my family actually be hurt that I had gone through this milestone without them? The doubt was nearly crippling at times, but each time my mother called to tell me about another perfect little house near them, I recommitted to my secret path. The day I received the keys was surreal. Sophia met me at the house, handing over not the keys, but a bottle of champagne and a small plant. "Every new house needs something living to welcome you home," she said, giving me a quick hug. "I am proud of you, Taylor Monroe. This is your space on your terms." I stood in the empty living room after she left, keys clutched in my hand, overcome with a mixture of elation and disbelief. I had done it. I owned a home. The walls around me were for the first time, I had a space that was truly legally me alone. Moving in gradually was another exercise in subterfuge. I maintained my apartment as a cover, slowly transferring my possessions in small loads that would not be noticed if someone dropped by unexpectedly. I made excuses to miss weekend gatherings so I could paint or set up furniture. I became adept at taking video calls in bare rooms, positioning my camera carefully to show nothing of my Those initial weeks were a strange double life. In my apartment, everything remained as expected. At my house, I slowly created the home I had always wanted. I painted the living room a soft sage green that would have made my mother wrinkle her nose in disapproval. I arranged my books by color rather than alphabetically, as she insisted was the only sensible method. I hung art that spoke to me rather than matching my furniture, small rebellions, but each own a declaration of independence. I planned to reveal my purchase eventually. Of course, I was not intending to keep it secret forever, just long enough to establish the space as undeniably mine. I imagined inviting for a dinner once everything was arranged exactly as I wanted it, presenting them with my achievement as a fa accompanied my mother being proud of my financial disciple, my father impressed by my independence. But life rarely follows our carefully constructed scenarios. And families seldom respond according to the scripts we write for them in our minds. The day everything changed was unremarkable at first, a Wednesday in late April, when spring was just beginning to assert itself over the lingering chill of winter. I had been in my house for nearly 6 weeks, still leading my double life, still gathering courage for the big reveal. That morning, I had a meeting scheduled with an important client at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had prepared extensively, creating detailed financial projections and rehearsing my presentation until I could deliver it in me sleep. But at 11:30, my phone buzzed with a text from my boss. Marcus, Lofton meeting cancelled. Rescheduled for next Tuesday. Take the afternoon if ya wind. You have been putting in long hours. I sat at my desk, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected free time. Normally, I would use such a gift to go to my house and continue settling in. I had a delivery of bookshelves scheduled for the following week and needed to clear the space where they would go. Making a quick decision, I packed up my things, told my assistant Dedra I was leaving for the day, and headed home. My house, not my apartment. The drive was pleasant, spring sunshine, warming my car as I mentally planned my afternoon. I would finally hang the mirror I had found at an antique store the weekend before. Maybe organize the kitchen cabinets in a way that made more sense than the previous owner's arrangement. Small, satisfying tasks that reinforced me ownership of the space. As I turned onto my street, a sense of peace settled over me, as it always did when approaching my house. That peace shattered instantly when I saw the cars in my driveway, a silver Lexus SUV I recognized as my mother's and a blue Honda that belonged to Vanessa. Next to them was a red compact I did not recognize. My heart stuttered in my chest as I drove slowly past my own house, unable to process what I was seeing. Maybe there was a mistake. Perhaps they were visiting someone else on the street. But no, the cars were definitely in my driveway. And as I circled the block mind racing, I glimpsed movement through my front window. Someone was inside my house. I parked around the corner, hands shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before managing to lock the car. Approaching on foot, I moved cautiously up the side off me property, where a row of hydrangea bushes provided some cover. I could hear voices now floating through the partially open dining room window. The crown molding is original to the house, my mother was saying, her tour guide voice in full effect. Taylor Monroe has no idea how lucky she was to find a place with these architectural details intact. I crouched lower, inching closer to the window. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see my mother gesturing grandly around my dining room. Vanessa Nadine gap recitively, while a woman I did not recognize, a stylishly dressed blonde, examined the built-in china cabinet. Has she decided on a color scheme yet? The stranger asked. This room would be stunning with a deep navy blue on. Fuels, Olivia, you know how indecisive she can be. My mother replied with a laugh that sent ice through my veins. That is why I wanted to show you the place. She needs guidance, and your I4 design would be such a help. They moved out of view, their voices fadingus. They continued into the kitchen. I remained frozen, a storm of emotions, making it impossible to think clearly. How had they found out? How had they gotten in? Who was this Olivia person that my mother felt entitled to share my private space with? I shifted position, moving toward the kitchen window, where I could hear them more clearly. My sister-in-law's voice carried through the glass. The kitchen is nice, but so dated. Those cabinets would have to go immediately, Vanessa was saying. And the countertops, I cannot believe she settled for laminate. We will help her renovate, my mother assured her. William and I were thinking of giving her some money for her birthday to update this space. It is just not functional for I bit my lip, hard tasting blood. Entertaining. I had bought this house for my own sanctuary, not as a venue for family gatherings. The kitchen was perfectly functional for my needs, and I loved the vintage charm of the original cabinets. They moved. Again, footsteps overhead, indicating they had gone upstairs. I crept to the back-off house, where a large oak tree offered cover, straining to hear through the partially open bathroom window. The main bedroom gets wonderful morning light. My mother was saying, I am thinking heavy drapes though in a nice burgundy to add some sophistication. How much did she pay for this place? It was Olivia's voice casually inquiring about my most private financial transaction. Just under 300,000, Mimithar answered without hesitation. She had a good down payment saved, but I still think she overpaid. The market in this area is not as desirable as the realtor led her to believe. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle an audible gasp. Not only did my mother know the purchase price, but she was freely sharing this information with a complete stranger to me. The violation felt physical, a blow to my chest that made it difficult to breathe. Well, Betrayal is perfect for summer barbecues, Vanessa chimed in. I can already imagine using that patio space when the weather gets warmer. Ethan could set up his grill over there. I was thinking the same thing, my mother agreed. And there is plenty of room for the kids to play when you and Ethan start your family. The assumption that my home would become communal family property sent a surge of anger through me so powerful I had to grip the tree to stay upright. This was exactly what I had feared. Exactly why I had kept the purchase secret. In their minds, my achievement was not mine at all. It was a new resource for the family to utilize, a new space for them to occupy and control. I stood there for nearly an hour as they toured every inch of my home, discussing their plans for my space as if I were a child incapable of making decisions. They critiqued my few furnished rooms, planned extensive renovations I had neither desired nor could afford, and mapped out a summer schedule of family gatherings in my backyard. A war raged within me between confrontation and retreat. Part of me wanted to storm in keys, jangling and demand they leave immediately. Another part, conditioned by decades of family dynamics, whispered that making a scene would only prove their point that I was emotional, irrational, and in need of their guidance. In the end, I chose the third option. I would wait silently until they left, and then I would ensure this never happened again. I remained hidden until I heard the front door open and the murmur of goodbyes. Peering carefully around the corner of the house, I watched as my mother locked my front door with a key I had never given her. The three women chatted briefly beside their cars, my mother patting Vanessa's shoulder affectionately before they departed in separate vehicles, utterly unaware of my presence or the storm they had unleashed. The moment their cars disappeared from view, I sprinted to my front door, hands trembling with a mixture of rage and determination. Inside, the lingering scent of Mimithor's distinctive perfume, a floral fragrance she had worn, unchanged since I was a child, hung in the air like an unwanted ghost. I stood in my entryway, surveying my violated space, noticing small changes. A throw pillow rearranged, a book moved from where I had left it, a candle that had been shifted to a different table. My first call was to an emergency locksmith. The company promised someone within the hour, and true to their word, a young man named Diego arrived 45 minutes later. I paid premium for same-day service without hesitation, watching with grim satisfaction as he replaced every lock in the house. Having trouble with break-ins in the neighborhood? Diego asked conversationally as he worked on the back door. Something like that, I replied, not wanting to explain that the intruders were my own family. The locks were barely changed when my phone began ringing, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, and again ignored it. On the third call, I finally answered, stepping out onto my back patio, for a conversation I knew would benefit Taylor Monroe. My mother's voice was sharp with indignation. I just tried to stop by your house again to drop off some paint samples, and Mikey does not work. Did you change the locks? The casual admission that she had planned a second unauthorized visit the same day sent a fresh wave of anger through me. Yes, I changed the locks, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. Would you like to explain why you had a key to my house in the first place? Or why you felt entitled to give you a tour to Vanessa and someone I have never even met? A moment of silence followed, and I could almost see my mother's expression. The brief flash of guilt quickly replaced by Rachel's defensiveness. I do not know why you are upset, she finally said. I was just proud of your accomplishment and wanted to show Vanessa and Olivia your beautiful home. Olivia is an interior designer, you know. She had wonderful ideas for your space. That is not the point, Mom, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. You did not have permission to be in my house. You did not have permission to make a copy of my key. You did not have a permission to share details about my private purchase with strangers. Olivier, hardly a stranger. My mother scoffed. She is Denise's daughter. You remember Denise from church. Besides, we are family, Taylor Monroe. Family does not need permission. That is exactly the problem, I said. You have never respected my boundaries, never. From reading my diary as a child, to opening my mail as an adult. Opening your mail, she interrupted, but her voice had that slight pitch change I recognized from childhood when she was caught in a lie. Yes, Mom. The closing documents for this house were mailed to me. That is how you found out, is it not? You took my mail from my apartment while I was at work. The silence on the other end confirmed my suspicion. Taylor Monroe, she finally said, her voice softening to the persuasive tone that had always managed to make me doubt myself. I was worried about you. You have been so secretive lately, missing family dinners, not answering calls promptly. I thought something might be wrong. When I saw the envelope from the title company, I was concerned you might be in some kind of financial trouble. So you opened it, made a copy of my house key without my knowledge, and then felt entitled to enter my home and give tours while I was at work. My voice was rising again, years of suppressed frustration bubbling to the surface. You are blowing this out of proportion, she replied, a defensive edge returning to her voice. I was going to tell you this weekend. I thought we could surprise you with some decorating help. Vanessa and I picked out curtains for the living room. That would be much better than those flimsy things you have up now. I closed my eyes, pressing fingers to my temple, where a headache was beginning to form. Mom, what you did was wrong. It was a violation of my privacy and my trust. I'm 34 years old, not a child. This is my home, purchased with my money, and Yahoo had no right. I had every right. She interrupted, voice rising to match mine. I am your mother. Everything I have ever done has been for your benefit, to help you, to guide you. And this is the thanks I get locked out of my own house. Yes, I said, a strange calm settling over me as I realized there will be no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no apology. And you will remain locked out until you can respect me boundaries. I ended the call as she began another protest. Then turned my phone off completely, needing space to process what had happened and what would come next. That space was short-lived. Just as I was making a cup of tea to calm my nerves, a pounding at my front door announced the arrival of my brother Ethan. His face was flushed with anger as I opened the door, the security chain still in place. What the hell, Taylor Monroe? He demanded without preamble. Mom is at home crying because of you. Hello to you, too, Ethan, I said, making no move. Remove the chain or let him in. I assume she called you immediately after our conversation. Of course she did. She is devastated. How could you accuse her of violating your privacy when all she was trying to do was help you? I studied my brother's face, wondering if genuinely could not see the problem or if family loyalty was simply overriding his sense of right and wrong. Did Mom tell you she made a copy of my house key without my permission and brought Vanessa and a stranger into my home while I was at work? A flicker of doubt crossed his features, but it was quickly suppressed. She was excited. For you. She wanted to help make your house a home. It already was my home, I said quietly. My home, Ethan. Mine, not hers to redecorate, not Vanessa's to plan barbecues, and not a community space for the family to use at will. You have always been like this, he said, shaking his head. So selfish, so wrapped up in your need for space. Family is supposed be involved in each other's lives. That is what Love Island. No, Ethan, that is what control is. Love would have been respecting my choice to buy a house in my own. Love would have been waiting for me to invite you into my space when I was ready. My brother's expression hardened. So that is it. You are just going to cut us all off because Mom wasting to help. I am setting boundaries. I corrected him. Something I should have done years ago. Boundaries, he repeated with a bitter laugh. That is just a fancy word for shutting out the people who care about you. You know what? Fine. Have your precious space. But do not come crying to us when you realize how lonely it is up on your high horse. He turned and stormed back to his car, leaving me standing in the doorway, physically shaking from thick. Within hours, the text messages began pouring in. Aunt Patricia expressed her disappointment in my cruel treatment of my mother. Cousin Ryan suggested I needed therapy to address my paranoia about family involvement. Even my father, usually the peacekeeper, sent a tour message asking me to apologize to Mimother for overreacting. The family narrative was forming without my input. Taylor Monroe was being dramatic. Taylor Monroe was being selfish. Taylor Monroe was rejecting family love. No one, it seemed, was willing to consider that perhaps having a key made without permission, entering a home uninvited, and planning unsolicited renovations might actually be the problematic behavior in this situation. As the sun set on that tumultuous day, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the walls I had painted in colors of my choosing, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. I felt raw, exposed, and yet strangely liberated. For the first time, I had stood my ground completely, without wavering, without eventually capitulating to family pressure. The cost was high, family relationships strained, perhaps beyond repair, but as I looked around at the space that was truly mine, I knew I had made the right choice. The locks were changed. The physical boundary was secured. Now came the harder part, maintaining the emotional boundaries against the tidal wave of family manipulation that I knew was just beginning. The days following the confrontation settled into an uncomfortable new pattern. My mother, master of the silent treatment, Wentworthid, did not call again. My brother's messages became inconsequential before stopping altogether. Family group texts about Sunday dinners and upcoming birthdays notably excluded me. It was as if a decree had gone out. Taylor Monroe was in exile until she repented. A week after changing my locks, I arrived home to find a large gift basket on my porch, a peace offering perhaps. Theckered attached read. Thought these items might help warm up your house. Familial Ways forgives. Sunday dinner at 5:30. Love, Mom. Inside the basket were the burgundy curtains she had mentioned. Wanting for my bedroom, a set of kitchen towels in a color I disliked, and several framed family photos I had deliberately chosen not to display in my new space. The message was clear. Mimother was willing to forgive my transgression if I would just return Tuthfold and allow her vision for my home to proceed. I returned the basket to my parents' porch that night, with a note of my own. Thank you for thinking of me, but I have already selected decor that suits my taste. I will not be at Sunday dinner, as I am still processing the violation of my privacy. I hope in time you can understand why your actions were hurtful. 2 days later, my colleague Alyssa mentioned encountering my mother at the grocery store. She seemed really worried about you. Alyssa reported said you had been acting erratically, isolating yourself from family. She asked if you had been behaving oddly at work, too. The campaign had expanded beyond direct family members. Now my mother was approaching my coworkers, painting me as unstable, laying groundwork to invalidate my decisions. It was a familiar tactic, one she had employed during my college years when I first attempted to establish independence. As May turned to June, the attempts at manipulation grew more varied. My Aunt Patricia called to inform me that my mother had been to the doctor with concerning symptoms, heavily implied that my coldness was affecting her health. My cousin Emily reached out to suggest a family therapy session to work through this difficult time. A suggestion that might have held merit if it had not been presented with the underlying assumption that I was the one who needed fixing. Meanwhile, I took practical steps to protect my new boundaries. I hired a security company to install cameras at my front and back doors, added motion-sensing lights, and set up a video doorbell system. These measures felt extreme, like something from a psychological thriller rather than necessary precautions against one sound family. But the peace of mind they provided was worth every penny. When Thanksgiving approached, the pressure intensified. Family holidays were sacrosanct in our household. Attendance mandatory barring hospitalization or out-of-state travel. My father, breaking his month-so-long silence, called directly. "Your mother has set a place for you," he said without greeting, his voice gruff with disapproval. "Dinner is at 3. Vanessa is making her sweet potato casserole." The assumption that I would simply appear, that months of conflict could be swept aside for the sake of maintaining holiday traditions, was so typical that I almost laughed. "I will not be there, Dad," I said quietly. "I have made other plans." In truth, my other plans involved a quiet day at home and dinner with my friend Sophia, who had invited me after hearing about my family situation. But I owed no explanation. "This has gone on long enough, Taylor Monroe," my father said, his voice taking on the stern tone that had quelled arguments throughout my childhood. "You have made your point. Your mother feels terrible about the misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I interrupted, unable to let the characterization stand. "There was no misunderstanding. Mom made a copy of my key without permission and entered my home without consent. That is not a misunderstanding, Dad. That is a violation. She is your mother," he replied. As if this relationship status granted immunity from basic respect for boundaries. Yes, she island and I love her. But I cannot continue in a relationship where my autonomy is not respected. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unspoken family dynamics. Finally, my father sighed. I do not recognize you anymore, Taylor Monroe. The daughter we raised would never turn her back on family. The accusation stung, but beneath the pain was a realization. Perhaps they truly did not recognize me anymore because for the first time I was refusing to be the daughter. They had a daughter who subordinated her own needs to keep the fort or peace. I am not turning my back on family. Dad, I am asking for respect. When you and Mom are ready to discuss what happened, without dismissing my feelings, I will be here. Christmas brought a new tactic. Gifts appeared on my porch, a tower of brightly wrapped packages accompanied by cards heavy with emotional appeals. Christmas without you is not Christmas at all. My mother wrote, please do not punish the whole family because of one mistake. The words, months of boundary violations into a single forgivable error. It was gaslighting wrapped in holiday paper and tied with guilt instead of ribbon. Ill-lift, the gifts unopened in my spare room, unable to either accept or return them without feeling manipulated. They sat there like a physical manifestation of the emotional weight I carried, a reminder of the cost of standing my ground. Throughout this period, I found myself needing support to maintain my resolve in the face of such concentrated familial pressure. On the recommendation of a colleague, I began seeing Dr. Harriet Knox, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. In her comfortable office with its soothing blue walls and carefully tended plants, I began to unpack the patterns that had defined my family relationships for decades. What you are experiencing is a predictably response to boundary setting with people who have never had to respect boundaries before, Dr. Knox explained during one session. The guilt, the flying monkeys approaching you on your mother's behalf, the health concerns, the minimizing of the violation. These are all common tactics to bring you back into the established dynamic. Sometimes I wonder if I am overreacting, I admitted. Was changing the locks really necessary? Dr. Knox leaned forward slightly. Taylor Monroe, if a friend told you someone had made a copy of their house key without permission and entered their home while they were away, what would you advise them to do? Put that way, the answer was obvious. Change the locks. Exactly. The fact that the person who violated your boundaries is your mother does not make the violation any less serious. In fact, one could argue it makes it more serious as it represents a betrayal of the trust that should exist between parent and child. These sessions became my lifeline as I navigated the unfamiliar territory of being the family scapegoat. Dr. Me recognized that the pain I felt was valid, that my desire for privacy and autonomy was healthy, and that the discomfort of maintaining boundaries was temporary, while the freedom gained was permanent. Outside of therapy, I began building a support system of friends who respected my boundaries without question. Sophia, my realtor, became a close friend, always ready with practical advice or just a sympathetic ear. My coworker, Damon, invited me to join his friends for weekly game nights, providing social connection without the emotional minefields of family gatherings. My next-door neighbor, Grace, a mediocre with a nonsense attitude and a talent for gardening, offered both compensation and guidance as I learned to care for my small backyard. Those relationships, freely chosen and mutually respectful, stood in stark contrast to the obligation-laden connections of my family. For perhaps the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than how well I conformed to their expectations. The hardest part of this period was mourning the family relationship I had always wished for, rather than the one I actually had. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, grieving the mother who could have been happy for my achievement rather than seeing it as an opportunity to reassert control. I mourned the father who might have stood up for my right to independence, the brother who could have understood my perspective rather than automatically aligning against me. But through the tears and the guilt and the days of doubt, I held firm to one undeniable truth. This house was mine. The space I had created within these walls was a reflection of my own tastes, my own choices, my own self, and that self was worth protecting, even at great cost. 6 months after the lock-changing incident on a crisp October afternoon, I answered a knock at my door to find my brother Ethan standing alone on my porch. No, Vanessa, no parents, just Ethan, with his hands thrust deep in his jacket pockets and an expression I could not quite read. Can we talk? He asked, shifting uncomfortably from one foot to the other. I hesitated, scanning his face for signs of a family-appointed Miss Yonto, bring me back to the fold. Finding none, I stepped back and gestured him inside. Ethan stood awkwardly in my living room, taking in the changes I had made over the past months. The bookshelf I had built myself, the gallery wall of art I had collected, the comfortable furniture arranged to suit my habits rather than conventional design rules. "Your place looks nice," he said finally. "Different from what I imagined, but nice." "Thank you," I replied, still wary. "Can I get you something to drink?" He accepted a glass of water and we sat on opposite ends of my sofa. The distance between us representing more than just physical space. "I owe you an apology," Ethan said after a long silence, staring down at his water glass. "I should have understood what you were saying about boundaries. I get it now, and I am sorry. It took me so long." The words were so unexpected that for a moment I could only stare at him. "What changed?" I finally asked. Ethan sighed heavily, placing his glass on a coaster. "Vanessa and I have been having problems. Nothing serious," he added quickly, seeing my expression, "but enough to make us step back and look at some patterns in our marriage." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Last month, Vanessa, some of her personal things had been moved in our bedroom. Her journal, some papers from her work. At first, we thought maybe one of us had moved them and forgotten. Or maybe the cleaning service had shifted things while dusting." A cold feeling settled in Mistamak, already anticipating where this story was heading. Then, Vanessa noted Mom was making specific things she could not have known unless head railed off, then met my eyes directly, unless she had been reading Vanessa's journal just like she used to read yours. The validation his words, Providata confirmation that I had not imagined or exaggerated my mother's boundary violations hit me with unexpected force. For years, I had been made to feel that my desire for privacy was the problem, that my sensitivity was the issue. Now, here was proof that the pattern existed outside my perception of it. When Vanessa confronted her, Ethan continued. "Mom gave the same excuses she probably gave you, that she was worried, that she needed to know what was happening in her daughter-in-law's life to better support her. That family does not keep secrets." I nodded, all too familiar with the justifications. Vanessa was furious. "She told me Either's locks got changed or she was staying with her sister for a while." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, looking tired. That is when it hit me. If I was immediately ready to change the locks to protect my wife's privacy, why had I attacked you for doing exactly the same thing to protect your own? The question hung between us. An honest acknowledgement of the double standard that had been applied. "Because I was always supposed to accept Mom's behavior," I said softly. "I was raised to see her intrusions as love." Ethan nodded slowly. "And I was raised to see you as overreacting whenever you pushed back. I am sorry, Taylor Monroe. I should have been a better brother." We talked for hours that afternoon. Really talked in a way one never had before. Ethan shared his own experiences growing up as the favored child, the subtle pressures that came with that position. I explained how isolation from the family these past months had been both painful and clarifying. Together, we unpacked the dynamics that had shaped our childhood and continue to influence our adult relationships. "I am not cutting Mom and Dad out of my life," Ethan clarified as the conversation wound down. "And I am no tasking you to reconcile if you are not ready. I just wanted you to know that I understand now and I support your right to set boundaries, even if they are different from mine." His support, unexpected and undemanded, felt like the first brick laid in a new foundation between us. Not the complete reconstruction of our sibling relationship, but a beginning built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. 2 weeks after Ethan's visit, I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. At my insistence, we were joined by a family mediator, a calm professional woman named Ela, who specialized in adult family conflicts. My parents were clearly uncomfortable with having an outsider witness our family discussion, but they had agreed. My terms, a small but significant concession. "I want to start by thanking all of you for agreeing to this meeting," Ila began once we were settled with our drinks. "Taylor Monroe has explained some of the concerns that led to the current distance in your relationship. Today is an opportunity to listen to each other and, perhaps, find a path forward." My mother sat stiffly in her chair, clutching her latte with both hands. As if it might provide some defense against the conversation to come. My father looked uncomfortable, but resolute, high sighs moving between me and the mediator. "Taylor Monroe, would you like to share what you opt to gain from today's meeting?" Ila prompted. I had rehearsed this moment, working with Dr. Knox to find words that were firm but not accusatory, clear but not cruel. I love you both. I began meeting their eyes directly, and I miss shaving you in my life, but for us to rebuild our relationship, I need acknowledgement that entering my home without permission was wrong, and I need clear commitments regarding boundaries going forward. My mother's posture is stiffened further, but before she could speak, my father surprised me by placing a hand over hers. We should listen first, Janet, he said quietly, then turning to me. Go on, Taylor Monroe. We are listening. The simple act of being encouraged to speak without immediate defense or dismissal was so unexpected that I momentarily lost my prepared words. Recovering, I outlined the specific boundaries I needed. No unscheduled visits, no sharing of my information with extended family or friends, respect for my decisions about my home and life, even when they disagreed with them. When I finished, there was a long silence. Mimother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Her lips pressed into a thin Lynn thought could have signaled either anger or the effort to contain emotion. Janet William, would either of you like to respond to what Taylor Monroe has shared? Isla asked gently. My mother began to speak, her voice tight with controlled emotion. I never meant to hurt you, Taylor Monroe. Everything I have ever done has been out of love and concern for your well-being. It was the beginning of what I recognized as her standard defense. But then something unexpected happened. My father spoke up again. Janet, he said with a firmness I rarely heard him, with my mother. I think what Taylor Monroe needs is not an explanation of your intentions, but an acknowledgement of the impact of your actions. My mother turned to him, clearly surprised by this departure from his usual peacekeeper role. They exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire private conversation, and then my mother sighed deeply. You are right, she said first to my father, and then, turning to me. You are right, Taylor Monroe. I should not have entered your home without permission. I should not have made a copy of your key. I was wrong to do that regardless of my intentions. The words I had waited months to hear almost did not register it. First, an actual acknowledgement of wrongdoing without qualifiers or directions. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen, a knot of resentment I had carried for so long. I had almost forgotten it was there. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot to me. The remainder of the meeting was noisy. Old patterns reasserted themselves at times. My mother slipping into defensiveness. My father occasionally attempting to smooth over difficulties rather than addressing them directly. But with Ila's guidance, we managed to stay focused on the core issues and even reach some preliminary agreements about how a relationship might function going forward. By the end of the 2-hour session, we had drafted a basic framework for rebuilding trust. My mother agreed to text before visiting and wait for an affirmative response. My father committed to respecting my decisions about my home and life without trying to change my mind. I promised to make efforts to maintain connection through regular phone calls and occasional shared meals, while being honest about my needs and limits. It was a beginning, imperfect, but real. As we prepared to leave, my father did something he had not done since I was a small child. He hugged me, a proper embrace, rather than the perfunctory gesture that had become our norm. I am proud of you, he whispered, for standing up for yourself, for this beautiful home you have created, for becoming the strong woman you are. Those words so long desired and never expected brought tears to my eyes. Note of writhing was resolved. Not all wounds were healed, but a door that had seemed permanently closed had opened just enough to let in a ray of hope. That process of rebuilding trust was slow and not without setbacks. My mother attended 3 therapy sessions with me and Dr. before declaring it unnecessary, but host sessions established a vocabulary for discussing boundaries that helped us navigate difficult moments. My father surprisingly continued to meet with me and the therapist, occasionally seemingly eager to understand the dynamics that had shaped our family. 2 months after our mediated meeting, I invited my parents to dinner at my house. The invitation came with clear parameters. Arrival at 6, departure by 9. Not discussions of renovation or decoration, unless I specifically asked for input. To my relief, they respected these boundaries, completely admiring my homeas. It was rather than as they would have created it. As winter turned to spring, a tentative new normal began to emerge. My relationship with my brother grew stronger, built on mutual respect rather than shared family obligation. Vanessa and I developed a friendship independent of our family connection, finding common ground in our experiences and shared interests rather than merely tolerating each other as relations. The first truly successful family gathering at my house occurred in April, exactly 1 year after the lock-changing incident. A small birthday dinner for my father with clear beginning and end time specific invitations rather than assumed attendance, and most importantly genuine enjoyment of each other's company, without the undercurrents of control and resentment that had previously defined our interactions. As my mother prepared to leave that evening, she paused in the entryway, looking around at the home I had created. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I never would have chosen that color for your living room walls. But seeing it now with everything else you have done, I have to admit it suits you perfectly." Coming from my mother, this acknowledgement that my choices could be valid, even when different from hers, felt monumental. A small but significant step toward seeing me as a separate person rather than an extension of herself. "Thank you, Mom," I said, meaning it. "That means a lot." 1 year after changing my locks, I sat in my garden on a perfect spring evening, reflecting on the journey of the past 12 months. The small patio where my mother had once planned family barbecues without my input was now my favorite spot for morning coffee and evening reflection. I had planted lavender and rosemary along the borders there, scent filling the air with each gentle breeze. The path to healing had not been straight or simple. There had been moments of regression, my mother forgetting to call before stopping by me, occasional retreat into defensive silence rather than clear communication. But underneath the inevitable missteps was a foundation of respect that had never existed in our relationship before. Ironically, establishing firm boundaries had ultimately improved our family relationships rather than destroying them, as I had feared in my darkest moments. With clear expectations and consequences, interactions became less fraught with unspoken tensions and resentments. I no longer dreaded familiar, anticipating boundary violations at every turn. My mother no longer felt the need to monitor my life, constantly, gradually accepting that my independence was not a rejection of her. The change had not come easily for her. At Dr. Knox's suggestion, my mother had eventually begun seeing her own therapist, though she refused to share details of those sessions with the family. Whatever was discussed seemed to help, as over time, I noticed subtle but significant shifts in her behavior. She began to ask, rather than assumed, to listen rather than immediately offer solutions, to recognize when her help was not actually helpful. My father, too, had changed, in ways I had not anticipated. Once I broke the pattern of expecting him to mediate conflicts with my mother, he gradually found his own voice in family discussions. Our relationship, long defined primarily through my mother, developed its own direct channel of communication. We discovered shared interests in history and architecture that had gone unexplored during my childhood. Perhaps the most surprising transformation was in my relationship with Ethan, the golden child and the scapegoat roles assigned to us by family dynamics beyond our control gradually gave way to simply being brother and sister with all the complexities that entailed. We disagreed, at each other often, and built a bond based on mutual respect rather than answered family mythology. Even Vanessa, whose intrusion into my home had been part of the original violation, had made amends. In her own way, 6 months after the incident, she had invited me to lunch, just the two of us. "I owe you an apology," she said as soon as we were seated. "I should never have gone into your house without your permission. Andy should have recognized how wrong it was when Janet suggested it." Her directness was refreshing, her accountability, unqualified by excuses or explanations. "At the time, I genuinely did not see the problem," she continued. "In my family, everyone is in and out of each other's homes constantly, but that does not mean I get to impose that dynamic on you. Your boundaries are valid, and I am truly sorry. That lunch marked the beginning of a relationship between us that was fun rather than obligatory. We discovered shared interests in books and hiking that had never emerged during family gatherings. While we would never be best friends, we developed a genuine appreciation for each other independent of our family connection. My house, once the focal point of family conflict, gradually became a true sanctuary, not an isolation chamber cutting me off from relationships as my family had in a affair, but a space where I could engage with others authentically because I felt secure in my boundaries. The security cameras remained a practical precaution rather than a symbol of distrust. The spare key was entrusted only to my friend Sophia with the clear understanding it was for emergencies only. These measures, which had once felt extreme, now seemed like simple prudence, the adult equivalent of locking the bathroom door. Beyond my family relationships, the experience, offsetting and maintaining boundaries, had ripple effects throughout my life at work. I became more comfortable declining projects that did not align with my strengths or interests. In friendships, I learned to express my needs directly, rather than accommodating others at my own expense. In dating, I recognized red flags more quickly, no longer mistaking control for care or persistence for passion. Dr. Knox had been right. The discomfort of establishing boundaries was temporary, but the freedom gained was permanent. The guilt that had plagued me during those early months of estrangement gradually dissolved, replaced by a quiet confidence in my right to determine the conditions of my relationships. There were still difficult moments, of course. Family patterns established over decades did not disappear entirely in a single year. My mother occasionally slipped into her old controlling behaviors, especially during times of stress or change. But the difference now was that these slips were recognized and addressed, not accepted as inevitable or endured insolent resentment. The locks I had changed in a moment of righteous anger had come to represent something beyond physical security. They symbolized my ownership, not just of my property but of my life, my right to determine who had access to my space, my time, my energy. In changing those locks, I had declared myself the authority on my own needs and boundaries. A declaration that continued to echo through all my relationships. As twilight deepened in my garden anniversary evening, I thought about the young woman I had been a year before, terrified of family rejection, yet finally willing to risk it for the sake of her own autonomy. I wished I could tell her that the journey ahead, though difficult, would lead to relationships deeper and more authentic than she had ever experienced. That in standing firm, she would discover strengths she had not known she possessed, that the family she feared losing would eventually transform into something healthier. Precisely because she had been brave enough to demand change. The house keys in my pocket felt different now, familiar rather than fraught with significance. Just keys, not symbols of rebellion or independence, just the means to secure a space that was undeniably mine. A space where I could welcome others on my own terms. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? It is never easy, but sometimes necessary for real relationships. Togro. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below sharing your experience. And if you found value in hearing my journey, please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the locks we need to change are not just on our doors, but on patterns that no longer serve us.